Hi, good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Whatever it is for you. I hope that you're doing well. I hope that you slept well. I hope that you interpreted your dreams well. I had wild dreams last night. That's why I say that. The Queen of Cups. Okay, I had these wild dreams last night, and what I am being reminded of, like right now, as I'm processing those things moving forward, because whatever energies are going to be coming in my near future, my dreams are helping me to be able to process feelings so that what comes in my future is not alarming or overwhelming in any sort of way. So I'm being prepared to be able to process things properly and to be able to handle things maturely and rightly within alignment with what I'm supposed to be doing. And so this is the energy that I'm holding right now. And what I was reminded this morning was to pray for your enemies. And what that means, like, I try to express and expound on my spiritual knowledge in every way. I was raised Christian, so I do tend to communicate from that type of perspective, but I'm not a Christian, and I adhere to a lot of different spiritual practices and religious theology. Adhere to might not be the right word, because really I only adhere to myself and my highest power. But I've studied a lot, and I process a lot of it. I receive a lot of it. I use those things as tools. I use a lot of different types of spiritual practices and religious theologies as tools. And so I try to bring, these things, learning how to communicate those things is its own thing. And being able to make sure that I'm communicating in a way that is accurate and as, beneficial as possible is my ultimate goal. Obviously, my own bias causes, accuracy is almost like a matter of perspective or perception of my bias. I'm not here to tell anybody anything. I'm here to say words, and hopefully certain ones of them, in the way that I put them, resonates with you in a way that helps align you with your highest power. It's all just vibrational. That's the best that I got, right? But that's why, I have learned all these different things as well, is because I've learned all these different types of ways to communicate. So when I say pray, when I pray, I generally pray just to my highest power. I pray to the universe. Sometimes I actively pray to my ancestors. I pray to nature. I pray to the higher power of others. So for me, it kind of takes all these different shapes and forms. I was raised Christian, where prayer is a very specific type of communication that's directed towards a very specific concept of God. And being raised Christian, that concept then broke down into you pray through Jesus or in Jesus' name to God the Father. Those things just mean something different to me. So if that's how you pray, by all means. But if you pray in other ways, or, like I said, adhere to other different religions and everything like that, take of these things what you will. Obviously, a lot of the education that I have is Christian-based because I was raised Christian. But my point in being able to share those things isn't to convert anyone to Christianity by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not a Christian. That wouldn't be right for me to even try to do. It also wouldn't make sense with any of my beliefs. In fact, it's not that I'm trying to convert people out of Christianity either. If you need that crutch, use that crutch. But I really just want people to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and to be able to actually be in genuine communion with their highest power, which their highest power is also my highest power, right? And we're all connected. But when I use these very specific, like if I'm using Bible verses and if I'm using Christian lingo, I hope that I'm conveying these things in a way that allows them to be viewed as having their own sort of foundation or fundamental aspect, but that I'm conveying them and processing them and thus expressing them and educating with them in a way that allows the individual to be able to take them as something much greater than that and beyond that. Again, I'm not trying to, put a bit and bridle on somebody and direct them according to my concepts or my speech or my education. I'm trying to use those things that I have to hopefully help people be able to do whatever they need to do with those things in order to get where they're going. And that's not for me to say or to determine. But in this concept of praying for your enemies, my enemy, my adversary, my Satan, would be not even those that are in opposition to me by any stretch of the imagination, but those that are entrapped in a low vibrational state in which they find themselves in opposition to me. Because truly my faith is in love, and my faith is wide and grand, and my highest power covers all things, all concepts, all religions, all people. So there's no definitive, this group of people, this type of person, this appearance of anything that is in opposition to me, truly, as far as I'm concerned. But there's plenty who adhere to certain standards that would then find themselves in opposition to me within their own intent, right? And so those would be my enemies. And that's the way I tend to handle things. I try to love everybody. I try to give everybody respect. I try to learn from everybody. I consider everybody to have, their own capacity to teach from who they are, and that you can learn from anything you're willing to learn from, really, and that you can love anything you're willing to love. So I don't, even people who I know are actively trying to come up against me, I don't innately consider them an enemy. It really depends on where we stand with things. I can agree to disagree perfectly fine. But if somebody's actively putting in their spiritual work to cut me down or to block me or to rob me of something, then I would consider that we are enmities, or at least that we're at enmity with each other, for the fact that goes against everything I believe. Your spiritual practice is for you to come into an awareness of yourself and into the truth of yourself. And if you're using it to try to bring others down, it's not even just like, that's dark magic. You're a witch now. You're wicked. Like, I'm not giving you any power to that. It's sad. It's pathetic. That's not ultimately even going to serve you, nor any of the intentions that you have. That's not the way that the universe works. That doesn't match any sort of quantitative state. Like, it's a misguidance, and those only serve as karmic, they only serve as karma. They serve as a karmic tool, a tool for our karma. They serve as a learning lesson in the end. And like, it's not for me to judge and say if somebody needs to go through that learning lesson, by all means. If you hear me talking shit about somebody, you don't have to take that on at all. You can literally look at me and be like, okay, well, she's gonna learn. She's gonna learn from this, because you can't just put certain energy out. It comes back to you. And that was the concept that was being talked about behind this concept of praying for your enemies, was that, you know, and I've heard this before, and there's such a fine line for me about these things. But like when returning to sender certain energies, if you're doing it with a heart of bitterness, if you're doing it with a heart of revenge, if you're doing it in this sense of, I don't want to take this stuff on, and so I'm just going to give it right back to you. Like if it's really this, if you're really trying to fight those things, if you're letting that person be an enemy, and you're waging any type of war with them, ultimately now you're just creating karma for yourself that way as well. You're not really blocking yourself from anything or protecting yourself from anything, because even if it goes away for a second, it's going to come back twice as hard because it's coming back with your intent attached to it. So it's very important to keep your heart pure. And part of the praying for your enemies is to, one, help you be able to look at anybody that you could consider to be at enmity with you as, you pray for them out of love. You pray for them in a way that it's like you want to see the best for them. So it's helping you recognize that the best for anyone isn't to be in a vengeful spirit, or a warring spirit, or a spirit of conflict. You're also, a spirit of jealousy, a spirit of greed, envy, any of those things. So it's helping align you better that way. Praying is all for you, by the way. You don't move the hand of God or the universe or time or space with your prayers and your intentions. You align yourself with what is ultimately already divine and already being cultivated, and it just gets you in alignment. So it does come down to you anytime you're praying. That's why, praying for the salvation of others, if you're doing it so that you can cultivate a heart of love for that person, is one thing, but literally thinking that you can convert anybody, it's just not the right way. But praying for your enemies is also just a way to give them love. I posted recently a meme that I found that said, no revenge, because I'm just going to open my heart wider and love harder, essentially. And that's always been my go-to. And what that ends up doing is creating this sense of comfort and peace within oneself with what one has. But it also, one thing I've always noticed about this card is that this cup has these horns on it. And though the cups are normally love and affection and emotions and something so terribly pleasant, this Queen of Cups, her cup, looks kind of scary, kind of intimidating. And that's the point of it, because it almost, it turns this love into the same sort of thing where it has mother bear energy, right? It can be terrifying even, because all of a sudden you realize that no matter how wicked you try to be, how hateful you try to be, how given to your lowest energies that you can be, you can only get so low. But the sky is the limit. And so the more loving somebody chooses to be, the more it's oh geez, I can't even compete to that. Because anybody, if you knock somebody off of their throne and they fall all the way down to rock bottom, that's it. You can all sit at rock bottom, right? You can bring them down to your level. But the higher somebody goes, the harder it is for others to get to that point. And thus, the harder it is also for enemies to be able to come up against that person. Granted, the higher of a horse that you're on, the harder you're going to fall if you do fall. So there's always this constant bothing, right? This balance between these things. But that's what I'm getting from this, is that energy of, once you cultivate that true care for somebody, and it really this is about sitting in the comfort and security of your own capacity to love as well. It isn't the King of Cups. It's the Queen of Cups. So it's, in praying for your enemies, it's actually creating a protection for you Because if you hate those that hate you, you are literally just putting yourself in the same camp that they're in. So what protection are you going to have against people who hate you when you're actively given to that same energy, you know? And ultimately, that is why God looks at the heart, not the action, because, you know, somebody who murders people out of a sense of loyalty for a system or a person that is requiring them to murder, or for a paycheck, you know, it's not even an emotional thing. They're not any better or any worse than somebody who pretends to be such a nice, sweet, caring Christian person, but is secretly actually hating everybody with an eye of jealousy. You know, so it's not just about the action, it's about the heart of those things that really comes into play. And when you keep your heart pure, praying for your enemies is how you protect yourself from them getting to that core aspect of who you really are. You know, you can come up against me in all of types of ways. That's really just going to bring karma on you. I would warn you not to, because I'm keeping my heart right. So like, I'm in the right place. And if you're coming up against me for that, one, it's just proving that you're not in the right place. Two, I'm not creating a space for that to be the case. So you're using all of your spiritual practice, all of your power for creation, all of your power for anything in a very limited, low vibrational way, which ultimately is not going to serve you feeling powerful at the end of the day. Digging yourself into a hole is not how you end up feeling powerful at the end of the day. And, you know, getting yourself out of it maybe, but yeah, you're just setting yourself up for failure, really. Where the more that you're able to pray for your enemies, the more that you're able to set boundaries. Don't just give them leeway to be terrible. You know what I mean? Protect yourself, protect the things that you love and the people that you love and the things that you care for. Set boundaries, but you don't have to have a defense. God is your defense. The universe is your defense. Their own karma is your defense. And the more that you trust that, the more that you manifest that to be true. It's been very hard for me to do. And like, then in that process, I've learned like, okay, so it's okay for me to be honest and true about my experiences, but it's important for me to not be revealing the truth just at somebody else's expense. The point of the matter is for me to be in alignment with who I'm really supposed to be, and to trust that everything is working out for good to those who love good, and that as much as I've experienced karma and can recognize it and know that it's for sure, it's coming for everyone that way, even if they're not willing to accept it the same sort of way. And kind of just being able to trust in that, you know. So just an important little reminder. Hold on, I wonder if I can I get this message from here? Sorry, hold on just a second. I don't know if you can see me. I'm gonna pause this because my new job just texted me. Okay. I'm working for a company that's just starting up, so we're trying to figure out the logistics of how to get everybody to work and to training in order to be able to actually start the business. And it's the week before Thanksgiving, so right now would be an ideal time to get everything moving, but it's just about figuring all those things out. And unfortunately, myself and the other several employees are quite a distance from each other. Austin is huge. This place is huge. I think I've lived in other cities, but I feel like Austin is just so much bigger, like, and I don't know, yeah, Texas is just huge, because it doesn't even seem like it's that big in comparison to, like, everything, but, like, And I don't know, it's weird because in Wisconsin, you know, I was in Paddock Lake and it would take me like 20 minutes to get downtown Kenosha. And that wasn't like, it didn't seem like a long time at all. 25 minutes, and it didn't seem like a long time at all. But here it's like, it takes you 25 minutes just to get like a few miles. And it's like, depending on where it is, but yeah, just to get a few miles, and it just seems kind of crazy. We're like, the grocery store that I grew up by, that I used to walk to all the time, was like, I don't think it was even a mile away from our house. Maybe a mile. I don't think it was even a mile away from our house. So driving there would take like literally like 2 or 3 minutes. But here, like, well, I guess it only took me technically 5 minutes to drive like a mile and a half. It really just depends on where you're at, but the city is kind of crazy for that. So, sorry, that was a complete side note. All right. So we are releasing bitterness, because why are we going to give people that power? To make us bitter? Listen, I can handle being a tiny bit bitter. I don't mind it, but I need to be sweet with it. My bitterness can be valid as long as there's enough sweetness to cut it. But I like being sweet. I don't mind at all being spicy. I can even be real spicy, but I like to be sweet. I need those balances. I can even be super, super savory, but I still like the sweetness. If I'm super savory, like, bitterness and savory do not go together, right? Bitterness being having these like shallow resentments, savory being like being deep and fulfilled and fulfilling. They don't really go together. Sweetness can be, you know, sugar-coated nonsense that is easily palatable but makes your stomach sick. But the right kind of sweetness, especially if you're using like, you know, natural things and cultivating that sweetness, like a really well-grown pear, it's like absolutely, it's so sweet but so delicious. And it makes your body feel great. You know, I like being sweet. I do like sweetness, but I don't necessarily want to be like a sucrose syrup. Like, I don't want to be high fructose corn syrup. I want to be honey, right? And like, bitterness is fine. I like a little bit of bitterness, but it depends on what it goes with. Bitterness goes well with heat, actually. That sour tanginess. Yeah, we're all just little meals for God. It's literally like that Sausage Party movie. That's us. We're all just different kinds of food waiting to be prepared into meals. And we prepare ourselves into little meals and little snacks. And anytime we're part of any different communities, that's why, you know, it's very easy for any little group or large group to become toxic. It's like, just because you have a whole bunch of food at your table doesn't mean it isn't fucking McDonald's. It's just toxic, right? So, alright, let's see. We have 5 cards that came out face down and 1 card that came out face up. So what I'm getting right now is this is the card that's face down. I'm going to read this card, and then I'm going to read all of these 5 cards in relation to this card. And if there's any needs for any more cards, I'm going to use this deck, my Hello deck. Okay. So the card, and it came the 3 of Wands in the reverse. I happened to turn it in the reverse. I'm questioning if I should have done that, but then there's the 4 of Wands in reverse down here, and so it just felt, I thought they were the same card for a second. Should I keep this card in the upright? No, in the reverse is fine. Okay, So in the reverse, the Three of Wands. In the upright, it gives me a sense of opportunity. You're looking out at this vast sea of potential, and you're kind of just weighing out your options and prioritizing your energy that way. But in the reverse, it's kind of like being cautious. Relying on what you have to hold you, being cautious about moving forward. Considering those things, continuing to be open to considering those things, but not, doesn't have the same opportune feeling. It's almost like the opposite. We're looking back on choices that we've made, and we're considering what their consequences have been or will continue to be. What kind of prioritizing, like what serves us and what doesn't, based on past experience, things that we've done, and if that really resonates with who we are and what we're trying to do with our lives. So we have the Eight of Swords in the reverse. In the reverse, it's like in the upright, it's like trusting one's senses through really uncertain times and even potentially dangerous times. So in the reverse, it's almost like not trusting one's senses. Not trusting one's senses in like one's intuition. It's like it's referring to trusting one's senses with what you really can see, what you really can feel, what you really can hear. In the past, I was always somebody that was so given to a depth of perception and experience that I was always alchemizing everything. It was hard for me to the degree, and like I've talked about this before, but like to the degree that like if somebody was actively what's the word I'm looking for? Disrespecting me. If somebody was actively disrespecting me, instead of taking that as active disrespect and then setting boundaries based on that, I would alchemize it immediately. I would look through it and be like, okay, well, why are they doing this though? The whole reason that they're disrespecting me in the first place is in part because I've done something that they don't find respectable, and in part because they're not respectable. And then trying to figure out the balance between those things, and like, well, maybe it's, what can I do? What can I learn from these things? But this is right now giving me this reminder of not doing that, not taking so much control over the experience and your understanding of the experience, that you're trusting in your own understanding that way, but rather taking things at face value and being willing to step back and say, okay, this isn't for me. I don't need to make any excuses for it. I don't even need to understand it. If in setting a boundary, it finds a way to work around it, we can either set another boundary or we can figure out what to do at that point. If somebody, if I put a door up and close it in somebody's face, and their response to that is to kick the door down or to try to set the house on fire, or, then it's probably best to build up some stronger boundaries, right? If their response to that is to be like, okay, then I guess I'm leaving. And then I'm suddenly like, well, wait, I didn't actually want them to fully leave. I just wanted the conversation to not be going that way. Well, then you didn't set the best boundary, and you're going to have to learn what type of boundaries to set. Because people have their own free will, right? But if you put up a door in front of somebody and you close it, and their response is to knock on it, you can take that as like, God, this person just won't leave me alone. But you can also take it as them being like, okay, well then I respect what it is that you've put up. I'm still trying to engage with you within the boundaries that you've set. So will you let me in? Will you talk to me? It's about the most polite thing that you could do, right? Or walking away. It's totally fine. But it's about being able to figure out what boundaries you're setting and why. And it's not about looking deeper and trying to empathize to the point that you're making excuses for people's behavior. You don't want to be making excuses for your own behavior, let alone for somebody else's. You're not in control of somebody else's behavior. So, like, you know, that's what I'm seeing here. And saying that and going to that, we have justice in the reverse. And it's that too. It's like not making excuses for somebody's behavior. Justice in the upright would not to be making an excuse for somebody's behavior, but to define the consequences of actions a very specific way, where this is like, despite finding this balance of taking things at face value and for what they're worth, it's also about being humble and being open to kind of letting things speak for themselves. You can't move yourself, and I have, and it's toxic. You can't move yourself into a position of saying, okay, no longer am I going to be the one overreaching, so then people have to overreach for me. Like, no, the point is that we're not doing any overreaching. We're not giving it and we're not taking it regardless. So we're also not expecting it from others. When we stop making excuses for other people's behavior, we also need to stop making excuses for our own. And so this sense of justice comes in. We're like, you know, it'd be quick for us in if these were in the upright, it'd be quick for us to what these would look like in the upright together this way would be to say, I know what I deserve, and so I'm going to demand it. Where that's not what you need to do. If you know what you need to deserve, if you know what you deserve, all you need to do is create for yourself a space to be able to receive that and to make sure that you can set boundaries against the things that aren't that. And then those that are trying to give you what you deserve are free to give you that. And those that are trying to manipulate you or aren't trying to give you what you deserve aren't in your space to do that. But it's not, well, I want you to be the one that's giving me this thing, so this is how I'm setting myself up, right? And we do that so easily. I've just always, and I've struggled with that, and it's totally controlling. It's completely toxic. But a lot of times we convince ourselves and our egos that that isn't toxic because I just love this person and I see their potential for this thing, and I just know that they could give me something so perfect, or I could give them something so perfect. So I'm putting these expectations on this person, but it's fine. It's valid. We're like, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's toxic. You know, that's not what love looks like. Love isn't to say, I want the very best for you, so do what I believe is best. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem. That's not love. Love is to accept somebody where they're at and how they are, and to love yourself enough to set boundaries that are in alignment with those things. You know, love also isn't just letting somebody walk all over you and treat you like shit and become a monster because you don't love yourself. If you don't love yourself, and I've said this in other videos too, if you don't love yourself, then what is it exactly that you're giving to anyone else? Because if you don't have love for yourself, then what are you giving? You don't have love to give. So what is it that you're giving? And if you're not receiving love into yourself, then how are you going to expect somebody else to do something you're not willing to do yourself? That's not love. That's not love. So, you know, this justice in the reverse is the reminder of those things, because it's so easy for us to get in our egos. And like I've said before too, like our ego is a part of us, and it's a great tool for our identity, and it's so closely tied to our identity that it does this little trick where it starts to feel invalid because it isn't our identity, it's just attached to it. And it starts to play as if it is our identity, and we start to validate it as if it is our identity, and then it gets overinflated, and then we get fucked up and become toxic, and we don't really fully understand why, because we're still identifying ourselves by this thing that isn't truly us. It is a tool. I don't say slay your ego either. You know, I'm very much in this energy right now of not slaying dragons, but of befriending them and riding them and teaching them how to work with us so that we can all work together to build a powerful, beautiful kingdom. You know, the how to train a dragon concept, right? But it's true. It's so much better than the alternative. And I was also thinking this morning about this concept of Jesus Christ being the Antichrist, Jesus being an Antichrist, in the sense that ever since that figure, that historical figure came into history, people have believed it morally upright and righteously valid to look outside of themselves for a savior and to fall back on somebody else's spiritual work and crucifixion in order to meet their own salvation. And like, that's not how this works. You're not saved by grace that way. You're saved through faith. It's just grace that allows you to be able to have faith, and it's faith in grace that allows you to be able to save yourself. But it's carrying your own cross. It's repenting of your sins. It's not trusting that, well, I can be a pedophile, but as long as I claim Jesus, I'm still going to heaven and everything's still okay. Well, I can be a liar and a cheater and a thief, but as long as I'm really good to widows or making sure that these kids grow up in church, then I'm a good Christian. Yeah, I'm a drug addict and a sex addict and an abusive person, but I'm really nice at church and I get to church on time. So like, I'm a good Christian. Like, that's not what Jesus taught. That's not what any of this is about. And the church has done this really weird thing where it has used Jesus as a scapegoat in order to create this concept of a scapegoat. And that's simply not the way anything works. Simply not the way it works. So in that too, then we move into this Six of Pentacles in the upright. And the Six of Pentacles is kind of that same idea where, like, you know, he has scales here and he's giving to the poor. And it's this sense of like, well, because I'm a rich man giving to the poor, I'm a good man. But his scales aren't actually balanced, because as you see here, there's only 2 pentacles above actual balance. There's only 1 pentacle above himself, and then there's 3 pentacles above those in need, and the giving that he's doing to the needy. And so he's convincing himself of this concept that in giving to the poor, in doing these certain righteous moral acts, he's righteous. When he isn't, because righteousness isn't just some concept that you can cater to in order to claim. It's an actual ultimate balance of energies and resources and concepts of selves and a person with their highest alignment with their highest power. That's what true righteousness is. It isn't appearing to be righteous. It's truly being in alignment with your highest power. And that's not for anybody else to judge. When Mary Magdalene came in, a prostitute came in and was weeping and used whatever oils she had in order to wash Jesus' feet with her own hair, because she didn't even have anything properly to use. She was just using what she had. The disciples themselves looked at that and judged that as less than righteous. In fact, they questioned Jesus, how could you even make a space for this to be happening? This isn't righteousness. This woman is a prostitute. And Jesus said, what are you talking about? This is the utmost righteousness. She's doing whatever she can with what she has right now to be in the whatever alignment she can be. And that's what alignment with your highest power actually looks like. It doesn't look like being on top of a throne, on top of the world, where you get to judge everybody else. It looks like being the most genuine aspect of yourself so that you are in proper alignment. Like I said, it's not about, forcing things into a position where you can be like, okay, now I'm rich. True abundance is letting yourself fall into alignment with what it is that the universe wants to continue to be able to give you so that you can be abundant. It isn't just receiving a check and then spending it all. It isn't, putting on a fancy robe so that people know that you're rich and then going and giving to the poor so that people can see how generous you are, and then carrying a scale around saying, I'm balanced. That's not at all what it looks like at all. Now here it's interesting to have this Four of Wands in the in the reverse. Like I said, I had almost confused these, and I'll have to figure out where that came from, obviously because they look very similar. I had seen that this one fell out, but hadn't ordered them yet. This one was the one that was face down. So when I flipped it over for a second, I was like, wait, was this that one? Because I wasn't looking at this one, but there's a deeper meaning that's going on here. The Four of Wands in the upright is a sense of coming together in a emotional, positive, spiritual way, and being able to kind of hold each other up without a sturdy foundation, without any actual foundation, being able to stand on one's own feet without anything holding it up, right? But it's like celebratory, and it's a positive thing. In the reverse, it's kind of like not falling into the trap of being so convinced of one's own foundations that they validate and define themselves by those foundations without actually doing fundamental work. There is no fundamental work being done in this card. Like not counting your chickens before they hatch sort of deal, right? It's out of a stable foundation that stability comes. It's out of a loving heart that love exists, right? Like, again, like that's why, like, if you're not receiving love into yourself, if you're not given to love yourself, you cannot demand it from others. You also, whatever it is that you're giving to others and calling love, you cannot have any assurance that that's what it is, because it's out of the love in your heart that you have those things to give and that you also have those things to receive. If you don't have love in your heart, how are you going to receive it from anyone else? Because whatever you're receiving, even if it's love on their part, you're not going to recognize as love because you've never seen that. You've never embraced that. You don't have a space to receive that. So you can make the demands all that you want, but until you have these set foundations, it's really not going to mean anything. It can serve for community. And that's like a lot of issues, that I have with organized religion is because as soon as you have an established community for certain concepts and theologies, it creates a space where it's very easy for people who are not fundamentally sound and not actively doing that spiritual work to find a sense of security and a sense of camaraderie. And it's in that security and camaraderie, regardless of how shallow it may be, that so many people tend to exist for extended periods of time. And they can be all fine and good. They're giving money to the church. They're, making other people feel good. Like, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And, It's only at the expense of their souls at the end, you know, that's how it goes sometimes. But it's also within that space that's crafted where people with very ill intent can also have an equal space as long as they play the game a certain way. And like I said, as long as these people are to church on time on Sunday and talk to the right people the right kind of way, nobody's ever going to question if those people are secretly murdering people behind the scenes. And it happens, especially in churches, because of this. Because there's already a fundamental theology established that as long as you can adhere to that, you're not being required to have that theology fundamentally and of yourself. You're only being required to be able to prove that you can adhere to the fundamental theology. It's not coming from a personal relationship with God. It's coming from a person's personal relationship with their concept of God, or with their relationship with these other people in this community, or these standards and moralities within that community. And I'm not saying, again, that those things aren't good. It's just not genuine. You know? We're like, and Jesus kept saying that to the disciples. He literally told the disciples all the time, and they didn't get it. And we tend to, at church, we view the disciples like they were so holy and they were so perfect, and how great it must be to be a good enough man that you could be a disciple of Jesus, right? Like they were so much better than any other Christian. When Jesus himself had Mary Magdalene, considered Mary Magdalene to be of less reproof and reproach than his own disciples, because he consistently had to tell his disciples, I called you to a specific work, and so you're doing this specific work. But just because you're able to cast out demons and bring people to their own highest alignment through me and through these things that I've shown you, and just because you're constantly around me all of the time, doesn't mean that you're any better than anybody else. And I don't know why you guys keep thinking that. And they did keep thinking that. And they would judge, like, the blind people, the poor people. They didn't want the lepers touching Jesus. And he was like, do you guys have no faith at all? Like, how is it that you spend so much time with me and are so close to me, yet don't have these concepts down? And then they revealed it constantly. There was multiple different times where they were like, okay, so when we get to heaven, we're on your right hand, right? What do our thrones look like? And he was like, that is not what we're here for. That's not what this is about. I called you because there's a work that's to be done through you. But don't forget, like I said, like the people of like Pharaoh, who were also called by God for a work by God and never got to see paradise. Jesus was constantly reminding his disciples that they were no better than anyone else. And they just kept forgetting because of their position in being close to him. And how evident is that of modern Christians? So often they are the most deplorable of anybody because of their judgmental and bitter hearts. Because they believe themselves to be so much better than anybody else just because they're doing these A, B, C, D things when those weren't the things that needed to be done. When Jesus blessed Mary Magdalene, it wasn't because she did those A, B, C, D things. It was because of her heart. Because she was willing to prostrate herself in front of him and just be completely vulnerable. Just to show him, she wasn't even asking for a blessing. She just wanted him to know that she recognized who he was, and she recognized her lack of those things and what was keeping them separate, and she wanted so badly for those things, and she didn't know where to begin. I mean, she was just being honest. Jesus had to fight his disciples to get that out of them, and he still couldn't. At the point of his death, they were betraying him, talking behind his back, falling asleep even when he told them, please stay awake. Please stay awake. And then they fell asleep, and then he came back and he's like, guys, I know this is hard, but please, if your faith is strong, you will stay awake. And they still all fell asleep. As he's crying out sweat and blood and tears, you know, that was the work he was doing. And they just assumed, since they were close to him, they were the ones that got to constantly see his miracles. He let them pal around with them, so they must be so great. That's like a caution of the type of people that you build foundations with, right? Because unless you're literally the Son of God, which you can claim yourself to be. I'm an inherited child of God. I receive equal inheritance of Christ, and Christ said himself when he was resurrected that he gave the Holy Spirit, and that through that those that were called by God would be able to do even greater works today, in after he was gone than even he did while he was here. Most people just didn't understand anything that he was saying. They never understood what he was saying. They were just awestruck by the miracles and by the fact that he had a weird lifestyle. They didn't understand any of it. They really didn't understand any of it. How can you just travel around without anything to your name except your name? How can you leave your family and all of these people who love you? His friends would say that all the time. He'd go and visit his friends like Martha and stuff, and they would all be together, and then they'd be like, "Oh, Jesus, don't go. Come on, do you really gotta go save the world?" Those stories are they're there to show us our own hearts, and not, again, it's the same thing. I'm not here to drag somebody by the nose into what I've defined as the truth. That's not the reason I preach. That's not the reason I teach. That's not the reason I have anything to say, is to try to convince or convert. It's merely to use what I have to express so that those that do have eyes to see can see, those that do have ears to hear can hear, those that do have hearts to receive can receive. That is the foundation that we're talking about. That's why this is in the reverse. Because it isn't talking about a given foundation. We're not talking about the Church of Christ. We're talking about the Church of Christ being the actual body of human beings that all share in a very specific type of belief, which is a personal relationship with their highest power through these works, through the carrying of their own cross, through the willingness to follow God so strongly that they wouldn't even try to defend people putting them to death. In fact, they would ask God to forgive those people, because obviously those people didn't understand what they did. These are metaphors that are entirely relatable, even to this day. That's what makes those texts sacred, I have books. I don't like The Hobbit. I don't consider The Hobbit sacred, per se. I mean, it's just The Hobbit. I don't hold it like a sacred text. However, when I was reading it on my way hiking down from Wisconsin to Texas, it became sacred to me. And I know people that hold it that way. And it's because of the context of the text and because of what it can do for you and because of how you can use those things to guide you into your own sanctity of self, right? We can do it through anything. I've shown, you can do an oracle with anything. You can reach higher spiritual alignment with anything, because where it's coming from isn't those things. It's the heart of the person that wants to be in that position, that's willing to use anything. You could be out in the middle of the wilderness with nothing to look at but rocks and leaves, and those rocks and leaves will scream the name of God for you. They will direct you directly back to your highest power. You don't really need anything outside of yourself. What you need is the heart and of yourself that wants to come to these things. In the upright, this is this sense of opportunity. In the reverse, it's a sense of certainty. That I'm not just looking for whatever it is that's going to make me feel some type of way. I'm not just looking for signs outside of myself to say, yes, this is the thing. I'm able to enough myself make a decision and rest assured in it because I trust myself and know myself. Right? And so then we come to the Eight of Wands in the upright. Being able to have all of these skills and concepts and theologies and spiritual practices and senses of self that we can use in a very specific way. We know what we're doing with it. We're assured. This is a great card of assurance. There's always going to be a bit of trepidation in the third dimensional experience. That's part of the wonder of it. That's part of the glory of it, is that we don't know for sure, only because what that would require is for us to see it and to touch it and to feel it. That's how you know for sure, right? But there's so much to this experience that is beyond third dimensional measurements. And that's all for the sake of us being able to come into ourselves and trust ourselves truly too. Because we are the ones experiencing. The experience needs us to exist. We need to experience it for the experience to exist, right? But if we don't know ourselves, then we're not conscious to the experience. We're not actively experiencing it. You know, things are happening to us rather than for us. And that's the importance of being able to be assured of oneself. It's not that there isn't, you know, this one's standing alone. Like, it's not that there isn't purpose in taking your time to kind of consider what's ahead, what you're going to do with it, all of these different opportunities. That has its own beauty. But what we're talking about right now and what we're focusing on right now is how easily we let ourselves get distracted with the concept of choice, the concept of opportunity, and then start to identify ourselves by that ego. You know, this shallow thing on us that feasts on those things and requires those things, and suddenly now we're living a shallow life where we don't really know how to trust ourselves. We are constantly judging other people. We're doing shallow things thinking that makes us great. We have no moral foundations within our actual selves and no actual direction. It's very easy to fall into any number of these things when we aren't in proper alignment with ourselves first, and thus with God. Our highest power is within us, is directly connected to us and our experience. You know, so it's not for me to tell people what they require in order to get to that point. It's for me to do those things for myself, which again comes back into what I was talking about initially, the praying for your enemies. You don't pray for your enemies in a way like that you're wishing them harm or that you're trying to control their behaviors and their actions. No, you pray for yourself for strength to be able to set proper boundaries, for wisdom to be able to see what's coming even prior to it coming, to know what to do with those things, to be grounded enough that you can withstand anything. But you pray for your enemies so that they aren't given to the things that would make them your enemy, right? Like, and not even just because you don't want them to be your enemy, but because if you were given to those things, you would know what that was, right? Like, so you don't want them to be given to the things that you know aren't best for them. But ultimately, you don't get to determine those things. Really, the point of praying for your enemies comes down to not letting yourself become embittered, not letting yourself take on the power they're trying to have over you and ending up joining their camp as you're trying to swear that you guys have nothing in common, you know. The Bible says you can't hate someone who you can see, but love a God who you can't see. And I believe that. But equally, I don't believe that you can look in the mirror and hate yourself and then swear that you love God either. You know, we are all connected. We are all equal. And I think that all of those things are reflective of a toxic ego. And we all have the capacity to become toxic. You know, the importance of this is so that we are finding a proper foundation within ourselves and our perspective so that we're not given to those things that end up making things toxic. All right. Bless you. I hope this helped you, and I will see you in the next reading.